Well, if you've tuned into any of the lamestream media's news recently, you may have noticed that there is non-stop coverage of the Republican primaries. Everywhere you look, there's a story about Santorum or Gingrich or Bachmann or whoever. And really, it has become a reality TV show. This is Bob Tuskin with a Intel Hub News Brief. Recently, I got a chance to chat with Michael Badnarik, the 2004 Libertarian presidential candidate. We talked Ron Paul, we talked our local sheriff's office, and a number of different things. And here is our conversation in which we started off by discussing what he finds to be a distraction as well.
Well, the presidential campaign is designed to be a distraction. The last thing they want to do is talk about issues. The whole thing is like a Shakespeare play. And for the most part, the conclusion has already been predetermined before you sit down in your seat. And anybody who is surprised that Hamlet gets offed at the end, didn't read the script. And, the people that run the banks and, manipulate our money have already decided who they would want. All of the candidates are basically bought and paid for. So in the big scheme of things, it really doesn't matter who wins. And, it's mostly for show. However, this election cycle is different. The economy is finally bad enough where everybody is hurting financially, having difficulty putting food on the table. We've got foreclosure rates that are skyrocketing and people being put out onto the streets. And because people are suffering enough personal pain, they are beginning to get involved. We had the Tea Party develop, that was almost 2 years ago, maybe more. We've got the Oath Keepers, we've got the Occupy Wall Street more recently. I mean, you can't throw a stick without hitting a protest rally. And I saw a statistic that Congress approval rating is at like 9%.
Wow.
9%. The founding fathers had already thrown tea into Boston Harbor and shot and killed people at Lexington and Concord. I mean, this is ridiculous. If you and I had spoken 15 years ago and you told me that Congress was going to pass the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, this homegrown terrorist act, I would have laughed at you and might have even, done a, I forget what they call it, intervention. I would have done an intervention because I thought you were crazy, that the American people would never tolerate something like the Patriot Act. Well, I was wrong. And I'm not sure how much the American people are willing to tolerate. But we are getting closer and closer to the point where they're not willing to tolerate it anymore. The fact that the mainstream media has credited Ron Paul with coming in third, albeit a very, very close third, is a tribute to just how powerful public opinion has become. I secretly suspect that Ron Paul has actually won the Iowa caucus, and that they've kind of whittled it back to make it look like he only came in third. But the Iowa caucus is non-binding. It doesn't really mean anything politically. But the natives are restless. The American people are tired of the status quo. They don't like the Democrats. They don't like the Republicans. And Ron Paul stands out as the one man who has given a consistent answer for 30 years. I mean, nobody can point at Ron Paul and accuse him of being a flip-flop. In fact, for years they were laughing that Ron Paul was so monotonous in his position. So I think the American people are finally at a point in their lives where they are ready to consider other options, that they are ready to have some legitimate prosperity. And they they have come to the realization that the Democrats and Republicans and the status quo are not going to do that. So I think that Ron Paul has a legitimate chance. I mean, at 6 months ago, I would have told you that Ron Paul's a great guy, but that the powers that be would never tolerate that. And I think that the liberty movement is pushing so hard that they may elect Ron Paul in the White House in spite of all of the political corruption in the background.
It would be an absolutely amazing accomplishment to see that people are able to get out there and actually put in a candidate that stands for a lot of great things. But there are people out there that are saying no to Dr. No, and they say, well, we agree with him on many different issues, including his foreign policy, that kind of thing and whatnot. And that's what the lame stream wants to put him down for constantly. I mean, they just have the same talking points when it comes to him still to this day, despite the new surge of coverage that they're giving him. But I think it's very interesting that there are some criticisms that people have that they're liberty minded, but they still say, well, wait, is Ron Paul somebody we want in there? He's a Freemason. He doesn't go all the way with 9/11. People are looking at his connections with Fine, and I mean the list goes on. How would you address some of those criticisms that are holding people back from actually supporting someone who otherwise they would say stands for everything that they want?
Well, first of all, that's the first time I've ever heard Ron Paul accused of being a Freemason. Um, and the idea of not being willing to go all the way on 9/11. I mean, is this the uh, penultimate conspiracy theory that the government was somehow complicit in the World Trade Center collapse? And most people are not politicians. And I mean, I was asked several times during my presidential campaign back in 2004, if I would take an open position. Well, I was a third party candidate. I mean, I was already being ridiculed just because I wasn't, one of the two major parties. Um, there's no possible way that I could have taken a public stand on the World Trade Center bombing in 2004 without being painted as a lunatic. In 2004, there may have been 10% of the population that would even consider such an idea. Now, I think it's almost reversed. I think that 80% of the population suspects that it either was an inside job, could have been an inside job, and a relatively small percentage of the population is still naive enough to think that the official story is gospel truth. So it would be political suicide for Ron Paul to make any public statements, regardless how he felt. I mean,
Yeah.
if he does or does not believe it was an inside job, even discussing it threatens his chances of.
In fact, that's exactly what happened recently. I was on the road and I turned into the lame stream talk radio, and Glenn Beck was on, and they were playing a clip of one of these crazy 9/11 truthers asking Ron Paul why he doesn't come out and go the full way with the story here for the general public, and him simply saying that it was too controversial got them all up in arms, saying, "Oh, well, a guy who doesn't believe this wouldn't say it's too controversial. He would just say Al Qaeda because Al Qaeda did it." So they're already using just him being asked the question and just the slightest in the slightest way dodging it and not completely saying that it's crazy or it's a conspiracy or any of these terms they like to give to people that are asking honest questions. Just in him talking about that created a problem. So I think you're right. I think there's a balance there that needs to take place, and we can't be too hyperly critical of this. We saw the same sort of problem with the Deborah Medina situation.
Exactly. They did an interview with Deborah and deliberately painted her as a wacko. And this is the same kind of high school peer pressure that we tried to outgrow. I mean, you're in, high school, you got the cool clique, and, whatever these kids think is cool, and anybody that disagrees with them, you're just not cool. You don't get to sit at the same lunch table with us. And the mainstream media and the two major parties play the same routine. If you are not singing the song on key, then well, you're just not one of the cool kids, and we're not gonna let you play in our clique.
Right. Well, that's too bad because again, we need to get something changed. Now, for those though that say the presidential election is not something we should put our energy in, I'm a grassroots kind of activist. I think it needs to start in your own house, in your own community, at your city commission meetings, at your county sheriff's office. That in many ways is going to be our only buffer between us and federal tyranny. The hopes that a presidential candidate is going to be able to reform things to the extent that is really needed might be a bit Pollyannish in some people's opinion. What would you say to that?
Well, you can't ride a bicycle with only one wheel. You can't focus on the county local level and not address all the other things. You have to make a complete frontal assault. You got to, attack at every possible angle, and it's going to require all of us to participate. Now, interesting that you mentioned the sheriff. Most people are unaware that the sheriff is the highest constitutional executive authority in the county. The sheriff has the legitimate authority to throw the federal government out if the federal government is doing anything blatantly
Sure.
unconstitutional or even just unwanted.